Welcome to the project tonight. Escalating tensions as riots rage for the fifth day in LA. We chat to an injured journalist struck in the crossfire to see what it's really like on the ground.
Also, how a life-changing medical diagnosis brought two Aussies together and gave them a new lease on life with each other.
Last week, we chat with actor Corr and how he found himself stranded in the Aussie outback.
Wow, and has Apple accidentally transformed China into a global superpower? I reckon that will be a story to watch for years to come. Not on this show, we'll be gone, but on other shows you should definitely follow along with that one.
We are live for the time being from the lands of the cooler nation with the usual crew. Wonderful to have you here.
Hi guys. First time on this week. Have I missed anything?
No. Bring you up to
Sam's
speed.
got a tie.
Yeah.
I've got a tie.
This
Yeah,
is it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
probably
yeah.
the
I
biggest
like it.
news.
Yeah, I've rebranded.
Good, just in time, I think.
Finally.
Yeah.
Let's get into tonight's top stories now. And accused triple murderer Erin Patterson has spent a seventh day in the witness stand as her trial continues. Today, she was questioned about why her phone pinged at a known death cap mushroom site just hours before she bought a food dehydrator. She was also quizzed about her changing story and where she got the mushrooms used in the beef Wellingtons. She denied lying about buying them from an Asian grocer. She also denied lying about feeding lunch leftovers to her children. Ms Patterson has pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Well, let's get more information from The Age's crime and justice reporter Erin Pearson, who was in the Morwell court yet again today. Thanks very much for joining us. We heard more about Erin Patterson's shopping leading up to the lunch. Tell us more about that.
That's right. We know that in the lead up to the lunch, in the days that led up to the lunch in July 2023, Erin Patterson went to supermarkets and bought items to cook the beef Wellington. As part of those records, we saw exactly the items that were purchased, and she was asked and pressed today on that a little bit further because the volume of mushrooms that the prosecution say were purchased were just over 1.5 kilograms, and that was in about the 4 days in the lead up to the lunch. So Erin Patterson was asked, well, how much mushrooms did you have in front of you ready to be prepared when you were cooking the lunch? And she said, half of that, maybe about 750 grams. And when asked what happened to the rest of them, she said about 1 kilo of them she'd eaten in the lead up to the lunch. And she was also then asked a little bit more about the beef that was used in the beef Wellington and whether or not she could have gone to a butcher to buy the larger size, the log size, which is traditionally used inside a beef Wellington. She said no, she went to her local Woolworths and that's where she found the eye fillet steaks, and that's why she decided to use those, because that's what she says was available.
The accused was also asked about serving her kids leftovers. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a timeline that they went back and forth over today, the Crown Prosecutor and Erin Patterson. We know it was a Saturday lunch, a Saturday the 29th of July that the lunch happened. And Erin Patterson was asked if she knew and when she knew that a couple of the lunch guests, Don and Gail Patterson, were unwell. Now, Erin Patterson explained she learnt that on the Sunday, around the Sunday morning, that they had been taken to hospital. And the questioning then really honed in on, OK, well, if you knew at that point that some of the lunch guests were unwell that morning, that Sunday morning, why did you then serve some of the leftovers to your children that night for dinner? Now, Erin Patterson has maintained throughout this trial that, and to a vast number of witnesses that have come before the court, medical staff, friends and alike, that she scraped off the mushroom paste and the pastry that was on top and just served the kids the beef that was left over. So she says that she didn't realise that there was any serious illness involved with Don and Gail at that time. She knew that they were unwell, but hadn't sort of connected those dots that it could be from the meal. So she maintains that that's what she did. Yes, she served her two children those leftovers on the Sunday. She was pressed then further again about, well, did you do that? And to maintain a lie that, the children didn't get sick and couldn't have got sick because I didn't serve them these, or try and sort of distract the investigation or people that were looking into what was going on at the time, using it as almost a bit of a decoy, which she denied. She firmly and flatly denied that at any point did she serve her children anything that she believed could have toxins or poison in it. She maintained at that time on the Sunday she had no idea.
OK, Erin Pearson, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, it appears that rats are running rampant in Australia. A study across Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and Brisbane found 54% of rats which were tested, have a genetic mutation.
Shut up.
Researchers have discovered they're becoming resistant to the poisons we used to eradicate them.
Rats are really adaptable and they breed really fast. So it's probably likely that our use has encouraged this resistance.
Oh, no.
Those little lungs. And the major freeway between Geelong and Melbourne has finally reopened after human error sparked a complete traffic meltdown early this morning. Inbound lanes were closed for 4 hours during the morning commute after botched repairs to a bridge expansion joint caused multiple crashes and a truck rollover. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt. Traffic was banked back for kilometres until the road was cleared. An investigation into the drama is underway.
Georgie Tunney, you didn't tell me you took the Princess Highway into work this morning, but yeah, I found out now. It was crazy. I was following it on the news this morning. This camera operator decided that covering the traffic jam was a perfect opportunity to just kind of go with it and show off their artistic flair.
Traffic is moving, but police are warning of very, very long delays. Apparently, these collisions occurred at about 4:20 this morning. No one has been injured, but yes.
What do we got here?
If you are thinking about coming in, that's the zoo.
The zoo? Oh, everyone's favourite part of the zoo, the tree stumps. Hopefully next the chopper can show us the seagulls at the bins. I love that.
All right, do a break. We'll see you soon. Welcome back to the project.
Well, the father of the late Steve Irwin has slammed proposed legislation that would allow crocodile culls and safari-style hunting trips in Queensland. Today, an inquiry into the bill received support from some local councils who say more needs to be done to protect communities. It's been put forward by Bob Katter's Australian Party, but Bob Irwin reckons culling is a pointless exercise.
We actually have a people problem. We've always had crocodiles. We've had crocodiles since the dinosaurs.
A former Brisbane Broncos player has been acquitted of raping a woman in a pub toilet by a Queensland jury. But after the verdict was handed down, TC Rabati entered a shock guilty plea, admitting to sexually assaulting a different woman in a separate incident. The charge wasn't part of his trial. He was sentenced to 2 years probation. The conviction was not recorded.
The US Secretary of State has given Australia a serve as he defends Israel's campaign against Hamas.
Australia's decision to sanction two far-right Israeli ministers has resulted in a reprimand from US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He says the move doesn't advance US-led peace efforts. Australia says it's about sending a message.
You have not ignored the international community, and we do not tolerate it.
Greta Thunberg has arrived home in Sweden after being deported from Israel for trying to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza by boat. During a Paris stopover, she called for the release of her fellow activists.
We did not break laws, we did nothing wrong.
As for Donald Trump's claim that she's an angry young woman,
well, I think the world needs a lot of more young angry women, to be honest.
And a stunning comeback has propelled the Socceroos into their 6th straight World Cup after a historic 2-1 win over Saudi Arabia in Jeddah. A penalty save by skipper Matty Ryan in his 100th appearance for Australia secured their berth for next year's tournament.
The journey that we obviously went on to get here, I'm just so proud of everyone. It'd be nice if I could work out how to sort of freeze time.
And that was because he wants to live in that fairy tale moment forever. And I mean, you think about it, if you're dreaming of being a keeper when you're growing up, you're lying, you weren't dreaming of that moment. But if you become a keeper, you're dreaming of that particular moment, being able to make that save in your 100th game, go through to the World Cup,
last time we had the grey wiggle. I love that the keeper is at the centre of our qualification story so often.
Same with the Matildas.
It's wonderful.
We're a good-keeping nation, aren't we?
Fantastic.
We get it. Yeah, that's what we do.
Other nations do the football playing.
Yeah, and we
do
the stationary bit that's not really involved in the game. That's where we really
excel. Basically, Aussie rules players in the goals.
That's great.
Excellent.
We should get into that sport. All right, now the sad news, it just keeps coming, guys. It's very sad. First it was us here at the project, then it was the ABC Axing Q&A, and I'm sorry to say now another giant of the entertainment world is being forced out.
After nearly 40 years on the water, a talented squirrel is hanging up her skis. Twiggy, the water skiing squirrel, gave her final performance in Orlando today. Twiggy has been entertaining fans around the world since 1979.
Yes, that wasn't a try.
That's it.
We're done.
What's the point?
What has happened to this industry is all I'm saying.
She better not be starting an OnlyFans. Only nuts.
I'm not even going to put... we've got to go to break. It doesn't get any funnier than that.
No, go on, let's see what you had.
No, I was just going to say that it doesn't matter. I was going to say squirrels don't live to 40, but only nuts? I'm not going to be
Yeah, you're right. So that was definitely funnier. You're right. We're off to break. We'll see you soon.
Welcome back.
Now, when you meet someone new, there's always a moment of hesitation, not wanting to go too fast too quickly. But for Emma and Martin, there's no time like now, and that's for a very good reason.
Yeah, I'm 51 years old, and I feel like my life's just starting again.
Don't start the tears already.
Why?
God.
Emma and Martin's life motto is to embrace the now.
Oh, day to day, minute by minute. 1 minute you can be boxing with my boxing coach, and the next minute you can't even pick up a phone.
They never would have met if they weren't diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's. Martin, a marine biologist, got the news in 2016.
I first noticed when I was out at sea on a research vessel, I was dragging my foot and then had a sore shoulder. And this is really common as well amongst people, where they start off with a sore shoulder.
Were you scared?
Yeah, I was scared.
In 2010, when Emma was 33, she was diagnosed with MS. 10 years later, she had a tremor in her hand and difficulty walking, relying on a mobility scooter. When her condition worsened, an additional Parkinson's diagnosis came somewhat as a relief.
I took the medication, and there I was a couple of weeks after I was out of the mobility scooter and basically walking again. So Parkinson's sounds scary, but for me, I was out of the mobility scooter and walking around again. So it was unbelievable.
Fate brought them together a year ago when they were on an advocacy panel for Parkinson's.
We were both sitting up on the stage as people with lived experience, and somebody asked a question. I handed Emma the microphone, and that's when I first saw her eyes, and I don't think I said anything else for the rest of that panel, but something in me changed.
When are you happiest together?
When I'm cooking for Emma.
When he opens up that oven and a tatatine comes out.
What have you got for us, Martin?
This up for us. Big one or small one?
I mean, big one.
Yeah, big one.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. It's very good.
One of your early dates, I understand that, Emma, you actually invited Martin along to a specialist appointment. Is that true?
Yeah, so I called Martin and said, I know that I've only known you for a week, but do you mind if you come with me to my neurologist appointment? And he said, instantly goes, yeah, sure.
Parkinson's is a degenerative brain condition that causes problems with movement. It occurs when there isn't enough dopamine produced, causing tremors, muscle slowness, mood swings and stiffness, known as a freeze. It's the fastest growing neurological condition in the world. What does it feel like to freeze?
I remember I was sitting in a shopping centre once and I had to call my mum to come and get me. I just grabbed onto her arm and we, got home together. But, to see your child go through that must be absolutely heartbreaking, yeah.
While most people with Parkinson's experience their first symptoms after 60, about 10 to 20% of people who have Parkinson's are under 50.
It's a very strong community. That's one thing I've found. Everyone's journey with Parkinson's is different. Their symptoms are different.
It's hard for young onset because they can't see. It's not like you've got a gash in your leg and there's blood pouring out everywhere and they just look at me and I look, relatively normal and they can't see the Parkinson's, but I can feel it.
What are people's reaction to you when you tell them that you have Parkinson's?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, a lot of people say sorry and say, well, why did you say sorry for? I mean, I'm not sorry, and all you got to do is if you get out there and enjoy life.
They support one another through the good and the bad. Martin will be there when Emma has deep brain stimulation, a procedure that's changed his life.
I'm lucky, but it's going to be great to have him by my side through the whole process.
And they're taking part in regular trials to help raise funds and awareness for the Parkinson's community.
I know it's a great idea about finding the cure, and that's obviously on a pedestal, but also impacting the everyday lives of people with Parkinson's would be huge. So you know that you can get up and make yourself a cup of tea if you want to, or do the simple things like go for a walk and
reducing the stigma as well.
Yes.
For changing that image of, the stereotypical very old person who has a tremor, but just empowerment really, isn't it? There's so much to learn, and so it's important just to be involved.
Emma's doing all she can to make sure she's the best version of herself, not only for Martin, but her 2 daughters.
I've still got the glass half full kind of mentality, even though living with Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis also can be quite scary, thinking about the future as well, having both people with Parkinson's, but you just do your best on the day, really.
What makes you scared about that?
Oh, I don't know, losing the plot. You get the information from the researchers about, the percentage of people with Parkinson's, they've got a higher chance of dementia and Alzheimer's.
It just shows you that every day is a gift. I always say the same thing all the time. It's be kind. And I think, importantly, you've got to be kind to yourself first.
Do you love yourself with Parkinson's?
Yes. I mean, I don't wish anything would be different, because there's a real silver lining to having something like this, or living through some kind of condition that you've got, because you realise that every moment's precious.
Sign the movie deal. Sign the movie deal. They're the most gorgeous couple, Martin and Emma. They were so generous. Martin is a really good cook.
Oh,
You
yeah.
see that tartare there was so good. But such a beautiful couple. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your home, because it was just so wonderful to see that love.
Yeah.
And you could feel that love. And they just take absolutely no moment for granted. It's so, so lovely. And that was put together by our fabulous producers, Hawa, Rowan and Renee. So thank you so much for that.
Great
For more
group of people.
information, and if you were able to donate to Parkinson's research, head to www.shakeitup.org.au.
Bloody good one. Hey, this American TikToker is working as an au pair for a family in Queensland, and she's documenting it all on TikTok. It's fantastic. Bit of a culture shock. Now, I will give you $1 million. I mean, like I have it. But if you can guess who pops up in the background of this video. Okay.
Hey guys, so I'm here with my au pair grandfather. Oh!
How you going?
But I ain't spending any time on it.
I'm so sorry, that's the wrong clip. That's actually a trailer from Wolf Creek 4. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. Don't know how that happened, actually.
Well, coming up, as riots ramp up in LA, we speak to a journalist shot while reporting from the chaos. You are watching The Project. See you soon. This is The Project. Welcome back.
In a desperate bid to restore calm, a nighttime curfew has been declared in Los Angeles, with police conducting mass arrests as dozens defy it, and protest against Donald Trump's immigration raids intensifying across the country.
Los Angeles, California. Have you heard of the blaze?
A curfew imposed on downtown Los Angeles, the district in lockdown from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
To stop the vandalism, to stop the looting.
More than 190 arrested on the fifth day of protests against Donald Trump's immigration raids.
If we want to see our city peaceful again, I will call upon the administration one more time to end the raids.
They're being snatched about Home Depots and Walmarts. Wake up, bro. Open your eyes.
His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness. Weakness masquerading as strength.
I see this as an unlawful invasion of California sovereignty.
Trump has deployed 700 Marines and doubled the National Guard numbers to 4,000, with troops expected to stay put for up to 60 days.
We will not allow an American city to be invaded and conquered by a foreign enemy. That's what they are. They just poured right in.
The situation was winding down. But that's not what Donald Trump wanted. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation.
And the protests have spread to at least 10 cities, including Atlanta, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. As Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom takes on Trump.
If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe.
An increasing number of journalists caught in the crossfire.
Police don't appear to care whether you're a journalist, whether you're a resident or a protester on the streets.
British news photographer Nick Stern forced to undergo surgery after he was shot by a plastic bullet.
Get out of the room! Camera, where's the camera?
But it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived.
Well, Nick Stern joins us now. Nick, thanks so much for joining us, especially in the circumstances you've just gotten out of hospital. How's the leg?
It's pretty sore. The biggest issue at the moment is the lack of mobility I have with it. I had a 3-inch by 1-inch projectile that was embedded in my thigh, and they had to cut a lot of muscle through to actually remove it. So it's pretty immobile at the moment. It's something that I'll have to get through with physical therapy and so on.
Oh, that sounds nasty. Can you describe for us the moment where you were shot?
Sure, yeah, I was setting up to photograph a group of people that were flying Mexican flags, and then beyond them were the LA Sheriff's Department's vehicles with their headlights on that were illuminating the flags. And then all of a sudden, I felt this incredible surge of pain in my right thigh. I was pretty certain I was going to pass out as I was trying to move away from that area.
Do you think you were intentionally aimed at, Nick?
It's a question that's often asked of LAPD and Los Angeles law enforcement in general. You know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. There's only one person who knows if I was aimed at intentionally, and that's the person who pulled the trigger. And with the lack of accountability that law enforcement here have, I doubt we'll ever find an answer to that.
Can you think of anything else in your surrounds that could conceivably have been a target?
You know, there's video of me getting hit from a number of angles, and the only thing you can see around me, about 5 feet in front of me, there's one of these guys flying the flag, and the device, which was, I believe, an explosive device, actually exploded right next to him. So whether, in fact, he was the intended target, but why are they firing these things at people waving flags representing no threat?
Nick, the curfew is now in effect. Do you think that will work to actually calm things down there in LA?
Probably 15 minutes ago, I got a news flash that there'd been multiple arrests for curfew breaking in downtown Los Angeles. So I think there's the answer to your question. No, it's not working. Unfortunately, all these methods that are being put in place are all there and antagonizing the situation. The people on the streets are not anarchists. What they're doing is a reaction to what's going on in the US at the moment with the mass immigration enforcement and so on. And I think we'll probably find that, you know, as they impose things like curfews, that reaction will continue still.
We're watching some of the chaos happening from the other side of the world. We've seen shops that are being looted, cars set on fire, rocks thrown at law enforcement. How do you calm that down?
And, you know, what I'm about to say may sound like it's coming from some lefty, woke, Antifa individual, but that's not me at all. In fact, when I was in the UK, I was a reserve police officer for some time. I've always been very supportive of police and law enforcement. But more often than not, what happens in Los Angeles is you'll get a peaceful protest. You might get perhaps a bottle of water that's thrown over the top, which crashes down near the police, and they'll call unlawful assembly, which basically means everybody has to leave the area. And that creates a flashpoint. From my experience in the UK particularly, law enforcement there will go out with this kind of attitude that they want everybody to go home safely at the end of the night. The attitude in Los Angeles seems to be that as law enforcement, we will win. We will have our way. We will stop you doing what you want to do.
All right, Nick, all the best with the recovery. Thanks so much for speaking to us in incredible circumstances.
Thank you.
All right, some more news now. And accused triple murderer Erin Patterson was back on the witness stand today as her trial enters its 7th week. Prosecutors questioned her about what they allege is her changing story and why her phone pinged at a known death cap mushroom site just hours before she bought a food dehydrator. She denied lying about feeding lunch leftovers to her children. She also denied lying about buying the mushrooms from an Asian grocer. Ms. Patterson has pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Federal politicians and senior public servants are set to get a pay rise from July the 1st, with their annual salaries going up by 2.4%. The boost will push up the PM's paycheck by nearly $15,000, so his salary will rise from just under $607,500 a year to just over $622,000. Opposition leader Susan Lee gets a 10 grand boost to $442,643.
There's so much bad news in the world. That's terrific. I'm so happy. That's really cheered me up.
And there wasn't a dry eye in the house as trailblazing AFLW players Erin Phillips and Daisy Pearce were inducted into the AFL Hall of Fame. Phillips, the two-time league best and fairest, joins her legendary dad Greg as a member of the exclusive club. They're the first father-daughter inductees.
To Dad, I can't imagine how hard it would have been to tell your 13-year-old daughter that she couldn't play the game that she loves anymore. And 27 years later, she's standing next to you in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I actually can't stop crying all over again. I was watching that last night and honestly, Erin Phillips, that speech just absolutely got me, but also Daisy's speech too. And she had a special mention for her dad as well, and he couldn't even look at her. He was just like sobbing in his hands, the pride there. It's what makes me so emotional because honestly, like me growing up, sport was not an option. One, I didn't have the talent, but two, it just was never a career opportunity. You could not pursue that. And it's what makes me so emotional when I go to Matilda's games and I sit in that grandstand and it's absolutely packed and you see all of the young girls there that know that they could be that if they had the skill and they wanted to. It's incredible.
A lot of people feel the same way. Do you think if sport were an option for you, you might have learned to ride a bike earlier, for example? Would that
Maybe
reverse park
this is
even.
about Erin and Daisy.
Oh, yeah, it's mostly, but it's also fun to make it about you, so, you know.
There's still time to conquer the Pyrenees, Georgie. There's more project on the way. Stick around. So right.
Coming
This is the project.
Well, the ascendancy of China is one of the most important stories of the 21st century. And it turns out one American company, Apple, may have inadvertently given them a helping hand. So how exactly did the biggest tech company in the world turn America's key rival into the technological and military superpower it is today?
If something goes wrong with China, I mean, there is no iPhone. It's as simple as that. And then when I began to look at it, I realized that nobody had really given it any due attention.
When journalist Patrick McGee started looking into the history of Apple, he, like the rest of us, thought he already knew the story. But what he uncovered shocked him. Is this a story of how Apple accidentally helped to develop weapons for America's main rival?
It's a kind of wild conclusion. I'm sort of picturing the Australian reader at home or listener at home who doesn't know anything about the book and they're thinking, what the hell? But it does kind of go there. But the unintentional part really is key. I mean, I think Apple sleepwalked into this crisis. And I don't say that in a damning sense. What I'm trying to sort of say is I don't really have any villains in this book. If there's a villain, it's shareholder first capitalism, right? The idea that corporations should be chasing lower cost as much as they can, a sort of race to the bottom around the world. And that leads to Apple making the rookie and calamitous mistake of putting all their eggs in one basket and unfortunately doubling down once they find out that that basket has turned into a surveillance state.
That shareholder-first approach is what prompted Apple to do what so many other big companies were doing in the early 2000s, moving production to China to take advantage of cheap labour as the country normalised trade relations with the West. But no other company transformed China the way Apple did.
If you consider Johnny Ive and Steve Jobs and how maniacal they were about the details, you know, just absolutely obsessed with everything about how they built their hardware, of course they were going to have a massive influence when you sort of took that paradigm and you transferred it over to China, a country that didn't have the tech competence when Apple began moving there in the early 2000s, but had to develop it at the behest of Apple in order to fulfill those requests at massive scale. I mean, the iPhone goes from 5 million units in 2007 to 250 million in 2015.
In order to get those iPhones out, Apple began training workers in China at an unprecedented scale.
The figures that astound people is that Apple has calculated that they've trained 28 million people in the supply chain since 2008. So that's larger than the entire labor force of Australia. Try to get your head around that.
But where things get really interesting is not what Apple made in China, but what it sold there. The company didn't anticipate how high demand for the iPhone would be within the country. One of the reasons it had only 4 Apple stores to service a country with a population of 1.4 billion. And that's where the yellow cows come in.
From the perspective of 2007, China's like a depressed wages market, and nobody expects the iPhone to do well there. And instead, you have such demand that these gangsters, these scalpers known as yellow cows in the country, end up taking control of distribution, where they're buying as many phones as they can from the 4 stores that Apple has in 2010, and they're amassing them by the thousands, bringing in migrants to snake around the lines in the Apple store to buy as many as they can. And then they're going to a city like Chongqing, population 32 million, number of Apple stores 0, and they're getting a monopoly distribution on the world's most iconic product. And it's just wild where that narrative leads you.
Where it leads us is here. The yellow cow gangsters begin buying phones from overseas, signing up for 24-month contracts, paying the first month, then disappearing once the phone is in their hands. But because phones bought overseas won't work in China, they zap the phone's processor. That masks the phone's country of origin, but also renders the phone inoperable. They then send people into Apple stores with the busted phones. Apple says, hey, that's weird, we don't know why that's not working. Here, have a brand new working phone, which the yellow cows then sell at a huge markup. It takes years for Apple to figure out that they've been the victim of an elaborate fraud, and their solution to this problem almost ruins them in a way nobody could have predicted. You've got this situation where there are all these faulty iPhones across China. As I understand it, that is connected then to what happens soon thereafter, which is the Chinese government starts getting grumpy at Apple for the products that they think they're selling in China. What's going on there?
Well, Apple begins to catch wind of that this is obviously not a real problem. We're being scammed. And so they begin refurbishing the phones rather than handing them a new one. And that actually ends up being like a different policy in China than in the rest of the world. So when Xi Jinping comes into power, Apple gets attacked by CCTV. You could call that like state-sponsored CNN. And the allegation is that Chinese customers are being treated in an inferior way to customers from around the world. But they were leaving out that the reason it was worse was that Apple was being scammed and like losing billions of dollars. So it's an absolutely wild narrative.
Well, is that because no one in China, apart from the people who were doing the scamming, knew what was going on?
I suspect so, but my sourcing is pretty damn good. It's not so good that it gets into, you know, what the yellow cows told the CCP.
Oh, well, fair enough. I mean, I'm a little disappointed you don't have Communist Party contacts in China, but, you know, we'll work with what we have.
Paperback version.
It happens quickly. Chinese consumers turn on Apple over the perceived insult, and iPhone sales plummet. Suddenly, the company finds itself being overtaken by local Chinese companies that have massively benefited from the supply chain Apple itself established, something that, incredibly, Apple actually encouraged.
If I'm Apple and I'm training all these suppliers, they obviously go and use those skills to provide to others. And so, you know, if I'm making a component for Apple, Apple doesn't want me to be so dependent on them that should they obviate the need for that component, I go bankrupt, because that actually happens multiple times and it would cause bad will for Apple. It would cause multiple problems. So instead, Apple says, however fast you are growing with us, we need you to grow that fast with somebody else.
So this is the bit I think people would want to hear explained. Why would Apple want their own manufacturers to support their competitors to the extent where they sell more phones than Apple?
They begin to understand that trying to maintain a proprietary sense of like, these are our skills and you shan't use them for anything else, isn't really going to fly in China.
Apple is panicking as Chinese competitor Huawei, a company Apple essentially helped build, outsells its phone globally. That's when something pretty unexpected happens.
I firmly stand by the government's decision to ban Huawei, as do my colleagues across the Parliament.
The government banned Huawei from the UK's 5G networks amidst security concerns.
We're not going to do business with Huawei. We're not doing business with us.
Between 2019 and 2020, Western nations start to turn on the tech company, accusing it of handing data to the Chinese government. When the US declares Huawei a security threat, it nearly collapses.
Trump goes after the biggest player in China, a little bit like you'd go after the king in chess. So he goes after Huawei. He tries to knock that piece off the table. Huawei is deprived of 5G technology coming out of the West, and it's deprived of Google services. And Apple was the biggest beneficiary in terms of Chinese market share, because if you wanted to buy a luxury phone, you could no longer buy Huawei. They could not supply you those phones.
Thanks to this change in fortune, Apple bounces back. But while the phone wars continue, it's a very different type of war that has a lot of observers worried, because it's not just smartphones that benefit from smartphone technology.
The same thing is basically happening with electric vehicles because that's a smartphone on wheels, if you will.
Okay, does it stop there?
No, of course not. I mean, Apple has no control over how these skills are used. So drones is an area where the Chinese completely dominate, and military weaponry. Xi Jinping's main sort of agenda in 2015 is called Made in China 2025. That is about severing China from the West and becoming self-sufficient in robotics, automation, and electronics. And I think Apple, however unwittingly, however, without having bad actors per se, became the biggest supporter of Made in China 2025.
While Donald Trump has been determined to move Apple manufacturing back to the US, it may not be possible.
This is a company that has $400 billion of revenue. 80% of it is hardware, and 90% of that is made in China. So when you say all roads lead through China, you really are talking about Apple being vulnerable or exposed to a blow-up in China like nobody else is. There is no other figure, no other company on the planet that has those three levels of metrics that I just gave.
If Apple and American industry writ large invested in China believing it held the advantage, it may now be realising the tables have turned. So America and Apple were playing economics while China was playing geopolitics. I mean, it's an extraordinary mismatch, I suppose, and you see the effects of it.
I would say that we played chess and the Chinese played Go. They don't go after the king like that. They don't try to knock Apple off of its course. Instead, they've basically encircled Apple's operations with their own supply chains. And that's what you do in Go. You encircle your enemy, you put them in a position where they can no longer move. And that's where I see Apple. They don't have any good strategic decisions to make right now. They can't move to the US, they can't move to India. They're basically just stuck in China. And that's why I unfortunately foresee the status quo continuing for quite some time.
So essentially, Apple has paralysed itself without meaning to, in certain ways.
Yeah.
That's kind of the import, and with all sorts of knock-on effects. That's the import of what he's saying in the book, by the way, he's written a book. The book's called Apple in China, and that's where you can read this in more full detail. I should point out, we did reach out for a statement from Apple about that, and they say the claims in the book are false. It's full of inaccuracies and no fact-checking was conducted prior to publishing. But that's their statement.
It is available on Apple Books, though. I just checked on my iPhone. $20.
Pretty amazing.
The difference between software and hardware I find fascinating because when it comes to tech companies, I think, well, for me personally, I always get caught up in the software of it and the coding and how all of this works with failing to fully recognise that, as you heard there, 80% of the
I don't even know how to play chess, so like that analogy didn't even help me at the end there.
You look like a chess nerd. You're watching The Project. Back soon.
Welcome back. You're watching The Project. What?
Ryan Corr has been a staple on our screens ever since his big break on The Sleepover Club. In the 2 decades since, he's held roles in Pack to the Rafters, House of the Dragon, and a string of critically acclaimed films. Now Ryan is leading an all-star cast in Kangaroo, a feel-good family comedy about a TV personality who finds himself suddenly stranded in the outback.
I've been doing the weather for 6 years. I'm sick of it.
Chris, take some time out. Might actually make you happy.
Oh, no.
Thought you might need some help with your car.
Who are you?
I'm Charlie. She looks pretty hungry.
Come on, jump in. I'm just kidding, Mark. Going in, you get it.
I hate this town.
Would you please welcome Ryan Corr? I would say the start of that plot feels a little bit close to home right now. You know?
I was going to say it's a little bittersweet. You guys are finishing on the 17th, so it's lovely to see you again. It might be lovely.
The 17th.
27.
Oh, 27. 27.
That's at least $30 extra in our pockets.
I haven't even got to the stationery cupboard yet.
Hey, tell us, are those real joeys you got to shoot with?
They are real joeys, and we had the incredible experience of going over to Alice Springs, where the film was shot, and working with Chris Barnes, known as Brolga, who runs the Kangaroo Sanctuary, and learned to mother them over a period of about 2-3 weeks. And we had to swaddle them and bottle feed them, and essentially because unlike dogs and cats, which you can put a biscuit and say, please come to the mat, they're wild animals, and they're orphans, and they're obviously very vulnerable. And so they have to learn to trust you and sort of bond as a surrogate mother in order to follow you around. So we were lucky enough to work closely with Chris and his partner Tani at the Kangaroo Sanctuary for a number of weeks and have that incredible experience.
So did you have some joeys that you had mothered that you kind of felt hard to leave, like was hard to leave them?
Yeah, it was hard to leave. It's hard to leave them, but I mean, the work they do over there is pretty incredible. I mean, you know, they raise them and put them back into the wild and provide a place for these young creatures. And it's a pretty, you know, that was the selling card for sure. It's sort of like, you know, Studio Canal's fantastic, the script's beautiful, but if you get to go and you know, help baby joeys out in the outback, I mean,
They say don't work with animals though, Ryan. Like, were there some unique challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, you can't train wild animals, and so we essentially had to sometimes let them loose in the set some barriers, and just sort of hope for the best and
this
hope
is how
that it
we
matched
treat
the
Sam.
script.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that sounds like this sounds so familiar. Wow.
Tell me about Brolga though. So he, you know, the founder of this Kangaroo Sanctuary, he's on set. I know actors, you're consulting with all sorts of people, but it must be different or wild to have someone like that on the set with you in this sort of situation.
I mean, it's based in his life, so it's loosely inspired by Chris's life, and of course we've taken liberties with the story somewhat. But yeah, he started the Kangaroo Sanctuary, I think, in 2005, and under a different name, and then in 2011 again, and yeah, he rehabilitates gorgeous baby joeys and helps them sort of live a life, and so it's pretty incredible the work that they do, and it was really humbling and a pretty incredible experience to be able to be there while they do the work.
Skin to skin with the joeys.
Do I have to what, sorry?
Do you have to do skin to skin and like put them into?
Oh, there's no breastfeeding at the start.
You make
like,
that
you're like a newborn baby.
Simulate a pouch.
No, but I'll tell you one interesting thing we did have to do over there. So when joeys are in their pouch, the mother usually helps them to learn to go to the toilets by sort of like engaging and saying this is how we go to the toilet and using their nose, I believe. So when you've got a baby joey, Chris taught us that you have to...
What?
Yeah, you essentially have to let them know where their parts are and how to use it by...
With your nose?
No, with your nose, not with your nose. Sorry. Fortunately enough, no, but with your hand.
Right, okay, thank God.
It can be quite an awkward experience.
We're used to seeing you in quite a few gritty things. I mean, this is lovely to see you get back to things, wholesome films, because, Ryan, I remember you way back when it was the Sleepover Club.
Oh, yeah.
I just saw some of my puberty on camera.
Yeah. When it was things like Silver Sun, when it's things like Blue Water High. I mean, how do you get a picture?
I love Blue Water
do we
High.
have a picture? Here we go.
Oh, thanks so much.
So welcome.
You guys did that to me last time.
Oh, that's the guy from my favourite band.
Yes.
Is it nice to have those teenage years just archived for life?
It's a pleasure. Yeah, and brought it every time I come here. Look, yeah, you know, I'm really lucky to be able to jump into different worlds in what I do. It's one of the sort of remarkable things about it. You know, you can go into 1788 Australia or post-Turkey war, and in this one, it's, you know, it's being able to sort of spend time with these incredible native Australian animals in this way.
And get your nose in there with
And get your nose in the pouch.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you for coming in. It's going to be fantastic.
Thanks so much for having me.
Lovely to see you. Hey, you can see Kangaroo. It's in cinemas from September 18. In the meantime, would you please thank Ryan Corr?
And thank you guys so much. You know, obviously, I'm saying personally for the support, but you know, I think on behalf of many Australian creatives and people of all walks of life, thanks for the support over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you.